Welcome to the online version of the Learn to Burn 1 class. I'm your host, Morgan Metter, and today we'll be discussing ignition techniques with Michelle Furr. Michelle is a private lands biologist for the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission out of the Fort Smith office. Thank you, Michelle, for joining us today, and I'll go ahead and let you get started on your presentation.
Thank you, Morgan. Like Morgan said, I am Michelle Furr. I'm the private lands biologist up here in West Arkansas, and I'm going to cover various ignition techniques we use on prescribed fire. Three main ignition techniques we use is backing fire, flanking fire, and head fire. And throughout this presentation, we are going to cover these more in depth. So backing fire. The backing fire is going to be your workhorse. This is lighting a fire against a fire break and burning into the wind. You can see that the flames are laid down and are lapping into the already burned area as they move into the wind. Something to keep in mind, flames will behave the same way as a backing fire burning downhill. We use backing fires to build black or burn ground. Once it is burned, it won't burn again. Black lines are what we use as our control lines. Fire breaks are intended to hold a backing fire until enough black can be built to hold a head fire. Since it is burning into the wind, a backing fire is sending smoke and embers across the fire break. So as always, it'll always want to jump the fire break to start a spot fire on the other side, which we don't want. So inevitably, you end up walking your smoky fire breaks back and forth, snuffing out any spot fires that have jumped the line. So backing fires feature low flame temperatures and lengths, but longer heating times because they're much slower. Backing fires can also boil the bases of saplings and kill them. So we use backing fires quite a bit, especially in forest systems. And there are going to be videos throughout this presentation so you can visualize what these different ignition techniques look like. So backing fires, where we use them, we usually use them in the understory burning, heavy fuels near control lines. Some advantages include low intensity, low scorch, minimal spotting potential, and high consumption. Some disadvantages is backing fires are very slow. So if you're burning a large unit and you're just using backing fire, it will take a long time. And poor smoke dispersion with backing fires. Flanking fires are burning parallel with the wind and are used to ring a unit. Flames are standing straight up and the speed is a little faster than a backing fire. Since smoke is being pushed down the fire break instead of over it, these fires usually don't cause spot fires. However, these fires are not to be trusted, as a slight shift in the wind will change a flanking fire into a head fire or a backing fire. We use these in shrublands to use to consume light fuels. The advantages are it's kind of in between a backing fire and a head fire, so it's easily modified. And some disadvantages are susceptible to wind shift is the main one. So remember that with the slight wind shift, you can end up with either a backing fire or a head fire. So moving on to head fire. Head fires are burning with the wind and move very fast with a jumping motion as it moves forward. Flames are lapping in front of themselves and preheating the fuels and making the fire jump faster. Keep in mind that fire burns uphill as if it were pushed by a stout wind. Head fires with enough momentum will spot across most fire breaks, if not properly blacked in 50 to 60 feet. Remember when we were talking about backing fires, we usually start with a backfire, and we do not light a head fire until we get at least 50 to 60 feet of black. Fire breaks are not designed to hold a head fire. This is why we use backing fires before, like I said, we light that head fire. Flame temperature is high, but the fire does not stay on a given point very long. Saplings are usually killed by scorching limbs and leaves rather than boiling tissues like in a backing fire. Head fires can be tall enough to take advantage of ladder fuels and scorched trees. We use head fires to burn large tracts, brushy fields, and light fuels. Some advantages include fast rate of spread, greater heat intensity, and more effective smoke dispersal. Some disadvantages, higher probability of spot fire, and larger fire breaks are needed. And it can create too much heat. All right, some more ignition techniques include, interior ignition. So these are for larger tracks or depending on your objectives and goals, maybe preventing certain vegetation. Let's say you got some trees in the center of a unit and you don't want to kill them. So we might use some interior ignition techniques for that. We can also use these techniques to mitigate smoke hazards and manipulate ecological effects. These include ring fire, strip head fire, and point source ignition. So for ring fire, we use these in most of our burn units, no matter if they're shrubland, grassland, brush, clear cuts, timber. We use ring fire technique quite a bit. Some of that advantages include fast, excellent smoke dispersal, very high intensity, and good smoke draw. And some disadvantages include strong convection column, may develop, and spotting potential may be very high. We spend 80% of our time on backing fires in the ring fire method to build enough black to be able to light a flanking fire and then a head fire. After the perimeter of the unit is lit, it will burn into itself and put itself out. This intense heat will also improve the lift of smoke. Interior lighting is necessary on most units over 20 acres. So be sure to do any interior lighting before lighting the head fire and don't trap someone in the unit with no way out. Another thing to keep in mind is this ring will come together somewhere in the middle and get real hot before it all goes out. So if that is desirable or not depends on what you're burning and what your objectives are. If this is a field with a thicket in the middle, we want to burn it up, that's great. If this is a hardwood forest, we may or may not want a hole in the middle with dead trees. If we don't, we come into the middle of a unit before the head fire is lit, drop some dots, which is what we're about to go over here in a little bit, and reduce the intensity when it all ties in. A strip head fire. This can be the slowest part of prescribed fire is usually waiting on the backing fire to build enough black to be able to ring the unit. You can step in upwind of the slow backing fire and light a small head fire to build black faster. Swinging the drip torch back and forth as you're walking can create a wider strip. These strips grow very fast. The distance you step in from your backing fire depends how wide your black fire breaks are. Stepping in too far can overwhelm them and make the fire jump. Again, this fire will build up momentum until it reaches the backing fire and they both extinguish. The greater the distance, the more momentum can be built. So this technique is also used to pull smoke off fire breaks by creating more heat and lift. So sparing your crew members from breathing in smoke and lowering spotting potential by reducing embers across your line. So we use this, for example, I can remember on highway when we had some smoke going over this highway. We needed to get the smoke off the highway. So we lit a strip about 10 feet from the backing fire so those fires could come together and pull that smoke off the highway. We use these a lot in large units. Advantages include fast, flexible, can adjust intensity and build more black a little quicker. And disadvantages include requires access to the unit, and fires will interact. And what that means is as two fires come together, they will become more intense. All right, point source ignition, or we call laying dots. We use these in our large units for interior ignition and understory burns and around fire-sensitive objects, which could include power poles, deer stands, stuff like that. Advantages include fast, intensity, highly adjustable, variable fire behavior, builds black quickly, you get a mosaic effect. Some disadvantages, you need access to the interior of the unit. Most units, especially in forest, will require interior ignition to speed up the burning and get the fire over with. We try to avoid using the phrase spot fire to avoid confusion with an escaped fire across the fire break. So we call these laying dots. This is a good way to build black in front of a fire break or to fully ignite a large forested unit. Biologists like this technique because it creates a lot of diversity in the plant growth after the fire due to the diversity in fire behavior. Each dot is its own backing, flanking, and head fire as it grows towards the next dot. The further the dots are apart, the more intense the fire becomes until it reaches another dot and they both extinguish. This method uses very little fuel since it's only a few drops are needed for each dot, and helpful on long hikes in the unit. The ignition device we use is called a drip torch. And the fuel mixture in that drip torch is usually 4-to-1. So 4 parts diesel and 1 part gas. If you have too much gas in your drip torch, it will cause a torching effect where you won't get the drip. Instead, it'll just be spewing a flame at the end. You want at least 4 parts diesel, so you get the drip effect, which makes lighting so much easier. All right, we're going to go over a few examples of some burn units. So in this example, we have a wind coming out of the south. So we are going to first light our backing fire. And once our backing fire is sufficient, we'll start on our flanking fires down the sides. And as the black builds, we will light our head fire to ring the unit. Here's some pictures. Another example, this property owner has a highway running through the middle of the unit, and we have a wind coming out of the northwest at 5 miles per hour. So we decided we didn't want to burn the north side of the unit because the smoke would be going over the highway. So we decided to burn the south side of the unit. So first things first is we light our backing fires. And once those are lit, we'll pull in our flanks and our head fire. Last example. So this is a large unit. And envision that there is a ridge running east and west. And on top of that ridge, We have hardwoods that we, don't want to kill. So we are going to have to do some interior ignition. So first things first, we will want to start our backing fire on the north side, and we have a wind coming. Let's see. Oh, there it is. We got a wind coming kind of out of the southwest, and we are going to lay dots on the base of that ridge, so we don't have a fast moving head fire up that mountain that may harden some of the hardwoods. So we'll lay our dots while the backing fire is going, and this will reduce the intensity up that mountain or ridge. Once we get that blacked in, there was our backing fire. We'll move to our flanking fire and end with our head fire. Okay, and if you have any questions, I will answer those.
Well, good deal, Michelle. Thank you. That was really interesting. Obviously, since this is a recorded presentation, there's no one to ask you questions. There's no audience. So you just have me asking you questions. So the first question I have is, so it's not a good thing to just have matches and set the fire, right? Because I'm sure a lot of landowners are like, man, I have matches that could be ignition devices. So, why can't I do that instead?
Well, with the matches, we sometimes have to use them because we forget a lighter. And you usually pull out an old matchbox that's been laid in a drawer for years, and you got to use like 10 of them to even light a fire. So, I mean, you can use matches if you have nothing else, but preferably a lighter. It makes things so much easier. We always have one in our pocket. Someone does on the fire line anyways. But yeah, we prefer to use lighters. Matches, you could maybe risk, catching your finger, burning your finger a little bit with those, but we prefer lighters.
Okay. I mean, it makes sense, but I could just hear, people asking that question, so I wanted to cover it.
Oh, yeah.
So you kind of touched on this on one of your slides where you're doing an example. But if your property does have a mix of fuels, so like say you have shrubby areas or a clear cut on your property or finer fuels like grasses, is it pretty common to use multiple ignition techniques for that?
Oh, yes, of course. Everything in prescribed fires, it depends. So, you have to look at, like you said, your fuel types and what your objectives are. Are you trying to kill saplings or do you have green grass? And that's going to determine what are you lighting, your backing fire or your head fire. Something I can think of, sometimes we're trying to burn in the spring or in the fall and fescue starts to grow. So our backing fires don't always work there because it has a hard time moving through that green grass. Mm-hmm. So we'll use a head fire, to push across that field. Because there is some dead thatch out there, but just not enough to allow a backing fire to move, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and that was actually going to be my next question, whether no, you're fine. This is kind of like an organic kind of situation. If you are burning, let's say in the dormant season versus a late growing season fire, I guess your ignition techniques may change because you were saying that you may have some green up and it may be hard to burn. So that makes sense. Because I'm sure, we do quite a bit of both now, doing a late growing season and dormant season fires. And so it's nice to know that there will be some change in ignition techniques, and you should be aware of those, depending on what your kind of goal is with your property as well. So that's good to know. And kind of my last question is, I assume you have to be more mindful with your ignition techniques depending on the type of fire break you're able to put in, because some landowners can only put in, like, say, a mow line versus a disc line. Do you have any kind of thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, lots of thoughts. Lots of examples from mistakes we've made with mowed fire breaks. So if this is going to be your first burn of your property, I would recommend bare dirt fire break. That will save you time and a lot of anxiety. A mowed break, you are going to be babying that break the whole time. So usually what we call wet lining, we'll put water down and burn off that wet line. And then have someone behind with the sprayer and putting that fire out before it crosses over. So you are probably going to be babying a backing fire almost the entire time, because you want to build quite a bit of black, because you don't really have a fire break that's going to stop the head fire. So definitely with a grass fire break, you'll take it really slow, and make sure you have built enough black to withstand a head fire.
Makes sense. Yeah, because I know, sometimes depending on the landowner's resources, they may or may not have the equipment to put in, like, say, a bare dirt fire break. And so they just kind of have to know what they're getting into if they're going to be the one running that burn.
And it can definitely be done. Yeah, it can definitely be done. It's just slower. You just got to take it slow.
Yeah. Well, good deal. I mean, that's all the questions I have for you, Michelle, unless you can just think of something that you would like to add.
I think I covered most everything. So, for sure, if people have questions, they can just find their nearest PLB or Quail Forever biologist and call us and ask us, whatever questions you may have.
Yeah, that's a good point. So for anyone that's watching this video, if you do have questions, there are resources online where you can find your local PLB, so private lands biologist, like Michelle. They cover the entire state of Arkansas. And then for Quail Forever, which is the organization that I work with, we don't cover the state as fully as the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, but we do overlap with the PLBs. So if they can't help you, then maybe we could offer some assistance. And just a reminder, all these Learn to Burn 1 classes will be available online, and you should be able to find them either on the Quail Forever Arkansas Facebook or YouTube page, and they should also be available on the Arkansas Game and Fish social media platforms. So I think with that, we'll end it here. Thank you so much, Michelle.